a whisper-quiet waitress, a powerful billionaire, and a mother trapped in silence. Ilara Vance was invisible, just another apron in a restaurant for the elite, until the night Julian Thorne walked in. He was a man who commanded a room, but his elegant mother, Eleanor, hadn't spoken a word in years. The entire staff was ordered to ignore her deafness. But as Ilara cleared their plates, she saw a flicker of desperation in the woman's eyes. In a move that would cost her everything, Ilara did the one thing she was forbidden to do. Her hands moved, forming a silent question. The answer she received would unravel a lie that had been protected by billions. The Aurelia wasn't just a restaurant, it was a stage. Every night, a performance of wealth and power unfolded on its plush carpets under the soft, forgiving light of crystal chandeliers. And in this theatre, Ilara Vance was a ghost. At 24, Ilara moved with a practiced invisibility. Her uniform, a stark black bistro apron over a crisp white shirt, was immaculate. Her light brown hair was pulled into a bun so tight it made her temples ache. But it was her eyes, a soft, nervous grey, that always gave her away. She kept them downcast, studying the intricate patterns of the parquet floor, the scuffs on a patron's expensive shoes, anything but the faces of the people she served. Ilara was shy. But it wasn't the shyness of a fawn. It was the dense, heavy silence of a survivor. She was a coda, a child of deaf adults. Her first language wasn't spoken, it was signed. Her world, for 18 years, had been one of vibrant, expressive silence, of hands that danced and faces that told entire stories. Then, the fire. The alarm she could hear, but they couldn't. The smoke, her own paralysis. Her shyness wasn't a personality trait. It was a fortress she had built around the guilt of being the only one who had walked out. Now, she worked at the Aurelia, a place defined by sound, the clink of Waterford crystal, the murmur of stock market triumphs, the sharp, pretentious laugh. Each sound was a reminder of the world her parents had been locked out of. She was saving every dollar, trying to pay off the crushing medical debts left behind from their final days, a mountain of bills that felt like her own personal penance. "Vance!" Ilara flinched, nearly dropping a tray of empty champagne flutes. Mr. Davies, the manager, was glaring at her from across the dining room. He was a man composed of sharp angles and sharper suits, and he tolerated Ilara's timidity only because she was ruthlessly efficient and never, ever made a mistake. "Table 7 needs their check, and the Thorns are on their way. 5 minutes. I want you on their station. You and Sarah." Ilara's stomach turned to ice. The Thorns. Even in a place like the Aurelia, Julian Thorne was a different category of guest. He wasn't just wealthy, he was foundational. The Thorne name was carved into museum wings, university libraries, and the tallest skyscraper in the city, Thorne Tower. He was young, in his early 30s, and had inherited an empire. He was also, notoriously, the most difficult customer they had. "Me, sir," Ilara whispered, her voice barely audible. "Are you sure?" "Sarah always." "Sarah can handle the wine," Davies snapped. "You will handle the service. You are quiet, you are precise, and you don't chatter. Thorne hates chatter." He straightened his tie, his gaze sweeping the room. "And Vance? The mother will be with him. You know the rule." Ilara nodded, her throat tightening. She knew the rule. Everyone did. Julian Thorne's mother, Eleanor Thorne, was profoundly deaf. But the standing order at every establishment she visited was absolute. Do not acknowledge it. No one was to try to sign. No one was to speak to her directly. All communication, all orders, all inquiries were to go through her son. To the world, Eleanor Thorne was a beautiful, silent accessory, a porcelain doll her billionaire son carried with him. He'll have the usual, Davies continued, the Barolo decanted, and he'll want the corner booth. Make sure the lighting is subdued. Go. Elara scurried away, her heart hammering a frantic, trapped rhythm against her ribs. She hated this. She hated the charade. In her world, deafness was not a weakness. It was a culture. It was a language. It was her parents laughing at a signed joke, their hands a blur of motion. Here, at the Aurelia, it was a shameful secret, something to be hidden by a son's suffocating protection and a mountain of money. As she passed the bar, Sarah, her senior partner for the night, gave her a pitying look. "Good luck," Sarah murmured, polishing a glass. Last time he was in, he sent back a $200 bottle of wine because he said the air in the room was too humid. And that was when he was in a good mood. Elara just nodded, her hand smoothing an apron that was already perfectly flat. She felt the familiar coldness creeping into her fingers. She wasn't just shy tonight, she was afraid. She was afraid of the man who was coming, but she was even more afraid of the woman he was bringing with him. A woman who lived in a silent world that Elara understood better than anyone in this building, but was forbidden to enter. The double oak doors of the Aurelia swung open, and a hush fell over the front of the restaurant. It wasn't a silence of reverence, it was a silence of tension. Julian Thorne didn't walk, he conquered. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke suit of such a dark grey it was almost black, and he moved with an impatient energy that seemed to suck the oxygen from the air. His dark hair was perfect, his jawline sharp, and his eyes, a piercing shade of Arctic blue, were already scanning the room for imperfections. Behind him, a valet pushed an elegant, lightweight wheelchair. In it sat Eleanor Thorne. Eleanor was the ghost of a great beauty. She was in her late 50s, with silver-white hair coiled in a perfect chignon. She wore a simple, impossibly expensive-looking navy blue dress and a single strand of pearls. Her face was serene, almost mask-like, and her eyes, the same blue as her son's, were fixed straight ahead. She was a portrait of grace and of absolute, suffocating control. A third man followed them, lingering a step behind Julian. This was Marcus Slade, Julian's cousin, and the CFO of Thorne Industries. Where Julian was a storm, Marcus was a fog. He was handsome in a softer, more approachable way, with a practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Julian, good to see you," Mr. Davies said, gliding forward with a strained smile. "Your table is ready. The corner booth, as requested." "It had better be," Julian said, his voice a low baritone that cut through the restaurant's murmur. He didn't look at Davies. He was already steering his mother toward the booth. "Marcus, you're on the inside." "Of course," Marcus said, sliding in. Elara and Sarah approached, moving in perfect, terrified sync. Sarah presented the wine list. Julian waved it away. "Barolo, 2010. Decant it, and we'll have 3 of the tasting menus." "For my mother," he said, finally glancing at Eleanor. "The chef knows her restrictions. No shellfish, no salt. And her scallops must be seared, not pan-fried." "Tell him." He was speaking to Sarah, but his gaze was on his mother, as if daring her to object. Eleanor simply stared at the centerpiece, a single, perfect white orchid. Elara's hands trembled as she filled the water glasses. Her station was closest to Eleanor. She could smell the faint, expensive scent of her perfume, like jasmine and old money. She found herself staring at the woman's hands, which lay perfectly, tragically still in her lap. "They're empty," Elara thought. A pang of profound sadness hitting her. Her hands are empty. "And Julian?" Marcus said, leaning in with his practiced, sympathetic smile. "I must say, Eleanor is looking wonderful. Truly. This new arrangement seems to be agreeing with her." Julian's jaw tightened. She's safe. That's what matters. Of course. It's just... The board meeting for the foundation is next week, and there are still whispers about her competency. As her doctor, I'm sure Dr. Croft will set them straight, but... My mother's competency is not up for discussion, Julian snapped, his voice dangerously low. The Thorn Heritage Foundation is her legacy. I am protecting it. I am protecting her. Is that clear? Crystal, Julian. Just looking out for the family, Marcus said, raising his hands in surrender, that oily smile still in place. The conversation was fast, layered with corporate jargon and veiled threats. Ilara tried to tune it out, focusing on placing the silverware just so, but she couldn't help but watch Eleanor. The woman was a master at lip-reading. Ilara could see her eyes darting between Julian and Marcus, her focus intense. But they spoke too fast, turning their heads, sipping their water. Eleanor was catching maybe one word in 3. She was isolated, surrounded by people deciding her fate, and utterly alone. At one point, as Julian and Marcus got into a heated, low-voiced argument about voting shares and bylaws, Eleanor's facade cracked. Her gaze drifted away from them. A look of such profound, bone-deep exhaustion passed over her face that Ilara had to look away. It was the same look Ilara remembered on her own mother's face, sitting at a parent-teacher conference, smiling and nodding as the teacher spoke too quickly, pretending to understand, pretending she wasn't being dismissed. Ilara felt a sudden, hot surge of anger. It was so potent it almost made her dizzy. This wasn't protection. This was a cage, a beautiful, soundproof, golden cage. She glanced at Julian. He was arguing with Marcus, his face a mask of controlled fury. He was so focused on the man opposite him, he had forgotten the woman beside him. Ilara's gaze moved back to Eleanor. The older woman's eyes were closed now, as if just for a second, bracing herself. When she opened them, they met Ilara's. It was an accident, a jolt. Ilara's programming screamed at her to look away, look down, be invisible. But she couldn't. In that 1 second, Ilara saw it all. The intelligence, the frustration, the loneliness, the suffocation. And in that 1 second, Ilara Vance made a choice. It wasn't a thought, it was an instinct. It was the primal, screaming need of one coda reaching out to a person trapped in the silent world. Ilara's heart was a trapped bird. Julian and Marcus were locked in their debate. Mr. Davies was across the room. Sarah was fetching the wine. It was just her and Eleanor, locked in that silent, accidental stare. Ilara's hands were at her side, partially hidden by her apron and the shadow of the large booth. She didn't even know she was going to do it until her fingers moved. It was a small, subtle gesture, a question she had signed to her own mother 1,000 times. Her right hand, with the A shape, thumb extended, brushed lightly down her chin. The sign for, "Are you okay?" It was a risk so profound it could end her career. It wasn't just breaking the Thorn rule, it was shattering it. It was an act of intimate, forbidden rebellion. For a heartbeat, Eleanor Thorne's face remained a perfect porcelain mask. Ilara thought she hadn't seen. She thought she had imagined the connection. She felt a flush of terror and shame, and her hand snapped back to her sides. Then, slowly, Eleanor's left hand, which had been lying dormant in her lap, moved. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible motion. Hidden by the tablecloth, her fingers curled, her index and thumb touching, then opening. A small, repeated gesture. The sign for a little. Then her eyes flickered to her son, then back to Ilara. She signed something new. Her hand formed the B shape, and she swiped it across her brow. Son. Then she made the sign for control. Tua's hands, moving in an alternating, grasping motion. My son is controlling. Ilara's breath hitched. She hadn't just been seen. She had been answered. A secret, silent conversation was happening in the most public place in the city, under the nose of the most powerful man in the room. Elara felt a desperate need to say more. "I understand. I am a coder." But before her fingers could even form the letter C, Julian Thorne's head snapped around. He hadn't seen the signs. He had only seen the connection. He had seen the shy, invisible waitress, the one he hadn't even registered as human, locked in a silent, intense stare with his mother. He saw the change in his mother's expression, the flicker of life, of conspiracy, before she could smooth it away. "What did you do?" Julian's voice wasn't a shout. It was a low, lethal hiss. It sliced through the restaurant's ambience more effectively than a scream. The murmuring stopped. A fork clattered against a plate somewhere, the sound echoing in the sudden, terrible silence. Marcus Slade froze, his wine glass halfway to his lips, a look of sharp, predatory interest on his face. Mr. Davies began to move, his face ashen. "What?" Julian repeated, his blue eyes narrowing to chips of ice. "Did you just do to my mother?" Elara was paralyzed. Her voice, her body, her very thoughts were frozen. She could only stare, her grey eyes wide with terror. "Answer me!" Julian slammed his hand on the table. The water glasses jumped. I... Elara stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. Were you mocking her?" Julian demanded, his voice rising. "Did you think it was funny? A little joke for the staff? Miming? Is that what this restaurant allows?" "Mr. Thorne, I assure you," Mr. Davies said, appearing at the table, wringing his hands. "Fire her," Julian said, his gaze fixed on Elara. "Sir? Fire her. Now. I want her out of my sight." I didn't..." Elara's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of pure, adrenaline-fueled panic. She looked to Eleanor, a silent appeal for help. Eleanor Thorne looked devastated. She was staring at her son, her face pale, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. "Julian, please," Marcus said, placing a hand on his arm. "She's just a waitress. Don't make a scene." "She upset my mother," Julian snarled, shoving his cousin's hand away. He turned his glare back to Mr. Davies. "Get her out, now, or I will buy this building and have it torn down by morning." The threat was so absurd, so cartoonishly villainous, yet everyone in the room knew he could, and probably would, do it. "Miss Vance," Mr. Davies said, his voice trembling, "go to my office, now." This was it, her job, her meagre savings, her penance, all gone in a single impulsive gesture of kindness. Elara turned, humiliated, her face burning. She couldn't even look at the table as she stumbled away. But as she took her first step, a voice stopped her. It was a voice she had never heard. It was rough, thick with disuse, like a rusted hinge. "Stop." Elara froze. The entire restaurant froze. Julian Thorne's head snapped back to the table. Eleanor Thorne was leaning forward. Her hands were gripping the table's edge. Her knuckles were white. Her eyes were fixed on her son, blazing with a fire that Elara had never seen. "You," Eleanor said, her voice cracking on the single word. "Stop, now." Julian Thorne stared at his mother. His face, moments ago a mask of rage, was now completely, utterly blank with shock. Eleanor Thorne had just spoken. The silence that followed Eleanor's spoken word was different. It was deeper, heavier, fraught with astonishment. Julian Thorne looked as if he'd been struck. He stared at his mother, his mouth slightly open. Even Marcus Slade looked genuinely stunned, his smooth facade completely gone. "Mother?" Julian whispered. Eleanor's gaze was locked on her son. Her chest was heaving, the effort of speaking clearly immense. She didn't say another word. She just held his gaze, a silent, powerful command. The fire in her eyes was unmistakable. It was the same fury she had just witnessed in him, but hers was older and colder. Julian slowly, very slowly, sat back down. He looked at his mother, then at the mortified Elara, then back to his mother. He seemed, for the first time in his life, utterly lost. "Mr. Davies," Julian said, his voice quiet now, but vibrating with a new, confused tension. "Just go. All of you. Leave us." Mr. Davies didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed Elara's arm, his fingers digging into her bicep, and practically dragged her toward the kitchen. "My office. 5 minutes," he hissed, his face pale and slick with sweat. Elara was shoved into the chaotic, clattering stainless steel world of the kitchen. The staff, who had heard the commotion, stared at her. She pushed through them, her entire body shaking so violently she could barely walk, and stumbled into the cramped, windowless office Davies used. She sank into the cheap visitor's chair, her head in her hands. The tears came now, hot and silent. She hadn't just lost her job. She had detonated a bomb in the middle of the most powerful family in the city. She had made a woman who hadn't spoken in public for years speak. Was it a good thing? A bad thing? She didn't know. She had acted from her heart, from her history, and the consequences were immediate and catastrophic. She thought of her parents. She had tried to connect, and she had been punished for it. The old, familiar guilt washed over her. "You always make things worse." She sat there for what felt like an hour, the sounds of the restaurant, service, plates, orders, slowly returning to normal, a tide washing back in after a storm. Finally the door opened. It wasn't Mr. Davies, it was Sarah, her fellow waitress. She was holding a small black linen napkin, folded into a tiny square. "Elara?" Sarah whispered, shutting the door. "Are you okay?" Elara just shook her head, unable to speak. "Davies is comping their entire meal. He's in full panic mode," Sarah said. "The Thorns are still at the table. They're not talking at all. It's weird. But a busboy, Miguel. He gave me this. He said the old woman, Mrs. Thorne, dropped it as he was clearing a plate. She looked right at him and pushed it off her lap. He said it was for you." Elara's head snapped up. Her hands were shaking as she took the folded napkin. It was thick, expensive linen. Tucked inside was a small, torn-off corner of the menu. On it, in shaky, slightly old-fashioned cursive, was an address. "The Vandermeer Gallery, 1045 West 19th. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., please." E.T. Elara stared at the words. A gallery, an address, a plea. "What is it?" Sarah asked, craning her neck. "Nothing," Elara said, clutching the note. "It's nothing." A new feeling was cutting through the panic. It was a sharp, clear sense of purpose. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was no longer in control. Eleanor Thorne hadn't just spoken to her son. She had reached out to her. The office door opened again, and Mr. Davies stood there, his face haggard. "Vance!" His voice was tired. "You're not fired." Elara looked up, stunned. "Sir, Thorne. He just left. He paid the bill, in full, and left. He didn't say another word about you." Davies ran a hand over his face. "I don't know what you did. I don't know how you did it. But you put this entire restaurant at risk. You broke the one rule." I'm sorry, sir." "You're suspended," he said. 1 week, unpaid. Go home, and when you come back, you will be on probation, and you will never go near that family again. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Elara whispered. "Get out." Elara practically ran from the office, through the kitchen, and out the staff entrance into the cool night air of the alley. She leaned against the brick wall, gasping. The city's grime and noise, a sudden comfort after the sterile tension of the Aurelia. She was safe, suspended, but safe. She opened her hand and looked at the note. The Vandermeer Gallery, 3 p.m. This was insane. She was a broke, shy waitress. They were the Thorns. This was a world she didn't belong in, a fight that wasn't hers. Julian Thorne was terrifying. His rage was a physical force. Getting involved was madness. But then she thought of Eleanor's face, the desperation, the flicker of life. She thought of her hands, lying still and empty in her lap. And she thought of her own parents, and the fire, and the silence. I froze then, she whispered to the empty alley. I'm not freezing now. She clutched the note and walked out onto the street, her decision made. The next day, Ilara woke up in her tiny studio apartment, a cramped space above a noisy bakery. The smell of yeast and sugar was a constant, usually comforting presence, but today it just made her nauseous. Her suspension felt less like a reprieve and more like the quiet before an avalanche. She spent the morning pacing, the small napkin with Eleanor's handwriting sitting on her worn-out kitchen counter. This was her chance to walk away. She could tear up the note, serve her suspension, and return to her invisible life. Julian Thorne would forget her. It would all go back to normal, but she knew it wouldn't. The mask had slipped. She had seen the person behind Eleanor's elegant facade, and Eleanor had seen her. More than that, she had seen Ilara's language. Ilara's entire childhood flashed before her. She remembered her father, a carpenter with huge, calloused hands, signing a funny story about a customer, his expression so vivid, the whole kitchen seemed to shake with his silent laughter. She remembered her mother, a librarian, teaching her to sign Constellation and Revolution, her fingers painting pictures in the air. Their world was rich and full. Then the fire alarm, a high-pitched electronic shriek. Ilara, at 13, had woken to it, smelling the acrid smoke. She had run to her parents' room. They were asleep. The special strobe light alarm, the one that was supposed to flash, had failed. She had shaken them, tried to sign fire and hurry, but her hands were clumsy with panic. She had screamed, a useless sound. And then she had run. She had run out of the house, screaming for help, and by the time the fire department arrived, it was too late. Her guilt was a cold, permanent resident in her chest. She had failed them. Her voice hadn't mattered, and her hands had frozen. Her shyness, her silence, was a memorial to that failure. Until last night. Last night, her hands hadn't frozen. They had moved. They had worked. At 2:45 p.m., Ilara stood outside the Vandermeer Gallery. It was a sleek, minimalist building in a part of town where the very air seemed filtered. She wore her only nice outfit, a simple black dress and flat shoes. She felt like a crow in a flock of peacocks. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy glass door. The gallery was cool and silent, the floors a pale, polished concrete. There were only a few other patrons, murmuring quietly in front of large, abstract canvases. "Can I help you?" A woman at a futuristic-looking desk asked, her tone implying Ilara was lost. I'm here to meet Mrs. Thorne," Ilara said, her voice small. The woman's expression changed instantly from dismissal to sharp attention. "Of course, she's in the private viewing room. This way." Ilara was led down a short hallway to a set of frosted glass doors. The attendant opened one. "She's waiting for you." Ilara stepped inside. It was a small, plush room, dominated by a single, massive painting of a tumultuous sea. Sitting on a bench in front of it, bathed in a soft spotlight, was Eleanor Thorne. She was alone. She was dressed more casually today, in elegant cream-colored trousers and a silk blouse, but she still radiated that same contained, quiet energy. She turned as Ilara entered. A slow, grateful smile spread across her face. Ilara's hands instinctively rose. "You came," Eleanor signed. Ilara smiled back, the tension in her chest easing, replaced by the familiar, flowing comfort of her native language. "I'm here. Are you safe? How did you get away?" Eleanor's hands moved with a fluid, articulate grace that was breathtaking. She had been starved of this. "My son," she signed, her expression complex, a mix of love, exasperation, and deep sadness. "He's confused. After last night, he's terrified. He thinks you're a threat. He doubled my security. But I've been coming to this gallery for 20 years. My driver, Michael, is loyal to me, not to Julian. I told him I needed an hour. He gave me 30 minutes. 30 minutes, Ilara said, speaking and signing at the same time, a habit from her childhood. "Mrs. Thorne, Eleanor, what is going on?" "Last night." Eleanor held up a hand. "First, thank you. What you did. No one has done that for me in 5 years. Not since my husband, Arthur, passed away. You spoke my language. You saw me." "I am a coder," Ilara signed. "My parents were deaf." Eleanor's eyes widened, and then filled with a profound, aching understanding. She reached out and gripped Ilara's arm. "Oh, my child, then you know. You know what it's like to be trapped between worlds." "I know," Ilara signed, her voice thick. "Julian," Eleanor continued, her signing becoming faster, more urgent. "He was not always like this. When his father was alive, our house was loud. Arthur learned ASL for me. Julian grew up with it. We were happy. But when Arthur died, Julian broke. He sees me as fragile, as his last link to his father. He thinks he's protecting me. Protecting you, by isolating you, by forbidding sign." Eleanor's face darkened. "That is not Julian. That is Marcus." "Your cousin?" "Julian's cousin. Marcus Slade. He's poison, Ilara. He has convinced Julian that my deafness is a liability, that our business rivals see it as a weakness, that by signing, I look incompetent, that by speaking as I did last night, I seem erratic and unstable. He has spent 5 years whispering in Julian's ear, turning his grief into paranoia. Julian thinks this cage is a fortress." "But why?" Ilara asked. "What does Marcus want?" "Control," Eleanor signed, her hands sharp and angry. "The Thorne Heritage Foundation, it's my passion. It was Arthur's legacy. I control the board. I control the assets. It's worth over $1 billion. Marcus wants it. He's been trying to find a way to take it from me. And now he's found one." "The board meeting," Ilara breathed, remembering the conversation. "Next week. Marcus has been building a case. He has a doctor, a specialist named Croft, on his payroll. Dr. Croft has been filing reports, doctored reports, saying my mind is declining, that my deafness is symptomatic of a deeper cognitive decay. It's all lies. But Julian is so terrified of me being seen as weak, he's played right into it. Marcus plans to use Julian's own protective measures, the isolation, the handlers, the fact I don't communicate, as proof. He will call for a vote to have me declared incompetent and remove me from my own foundation." Ilara felt sick. This was so much darker than she could have imagined. "And Julian, he'll let this happen." "He doesn't see it," Eleanor signed, her eyes desperate. "He thinks Marcus is helping him. He thinks they are protecting the family legacy. He won't listen to me. He can't hear me. Not really." She paused, her hands coming to rest. "But he saw you. And you, Ilara. You terrified him. Because you can hear me." Eleanor fixed her with an intense, pleading gaze. "I don't need a savior, Ilara. I need a voice. I need a translator. I'm going to fight him, but I cannot do it alone." This was the moment. The alleyway decision had led her here. This was no longer about a lost job. It was about a woman's life being stolen by the people she trusted most. "What do you need me to do?" Ilara said, her voice no longer a whisper. Eleanor's relief was so palpable, it was as if she had been holding her breath for 5 years. "We have 6 days," Eleanor signed, her hands and mind moving with a speed that Ilara had to focus to keep up with. "The board meeting is next Friday. Marcus will present his case, Dr. Croft will present his findings, and Julian will, God help him, probably support it, all in the name of protecting me from the stress of leadership. How do we stop them?" Ilara spoke and signed, her mind racing. "Can't you just tell the board the truth? It's my word against a respected specialist and the acting CEO of Thorn Industries. They will see me as a confused old woman, just as Marcus has planned. No, we can't just deny his claims. We have to disprove them. We have to expose him." "The doctor," Ilara said. "Dr. Croft. If he's been bribed, there has to be a trail." "Marcus is too smart for that," Eleanor signed, a look of distaste on her face. "It wouldn't be cash. It would be favors, investments, a position on a board, something harder to trace. But your instinct is right. Marcus's weakness is his arrogance." "And Julian's weakness," Ilara added, her voice hardening, "is his love for you. He's not the real villain here, is he? He's a victim, too." Eleanor looked at Ilara, a new respect in her eyes. "You are very perceptive. Yes, Julian is my son. I will not have him destroyed with Marcus. We must save him, too. We have to show him the truth, without him shutting us down first." A plan began to form, a dangerous, two-pronged attack. "Okay," Ilara signed. "Here's what we do. You have to fight Marcus on his level, the boardroom. You need a counter-proposal, something that proves you are not just competent, but brilliant. More brilliant than ever." Eleanor nodded. "I have one. A new initiative for the Foundation. One I've been developing in secret for a year. A massive grant program for deaf education and coder resources, using new technology and community-based support. It's fully costed. The proposal is on a drive in my study." Ilara's heart leapt. "It's perfect. It's not just a defense. It's an offense. It shows your mind is sharp and forward-thinking." "But they won't let me present it," Eleanor countered. "Marcus controls the agenda, and Julian will see it as too much stress for me." "They won't," Ilara said, a spark in her eye. "But I will. I'll be your voice. Literally. You will sign and I will interpret. We will do it together." Eleanor stared at her. "They won't let you in the room. You're a waitress." "I won't be," Ilara said. "I'll be your official, certified ASL interpreter, hired to facilitate your communication. It's a legal requirement, a disability accommodation. If they deny you that, that becomes the story." A slow, wolfish smile spread across Eleanor's face. "That is very, very clever." "Now for part 2, Ilara continued, her shyness burning away like fog. "While you finalize that proposal, I'll go after Marcus. You're right, I can't find a bribe. But I know a community, the deaf community. I grew up in it. We know how to find information. We have our own networks. What are you looking for? Dr. Croft, Marcus, anything. I'll start with my parents' old friends. Someone will know someone who works in his office or at his hospital. Someone who has seen something." Eleanor's face grew serious. "Ilara, this is dangerous. Marcus he's not just greedy. He's ruthless. And Julian, he has me watched, but he will have you investigated. He's already suspicious of you. When he finds out you're a coder, that you speak my language, let him," Ilara said, her voice steady. "Let him investigate me. Let him find me. It's the only way he'll ever see the truth. He has to be confronted, Not by his enemy, but by you. And I'm the only one who can bring you to him." Their time was up. They could hear the attendant clearing her throat in the hallway. "One more thing," Eleanor signed, grabbing Ilara's hand. "My driver, Michael. He'll be our courier. He can get me the flash drive. He can get messages to you. His number is on the back of the note I gave you." Ilara nodded, slipping the note back into her pocket. "Ilara," Eleanor signed, her eyes desperate and strong. "Why are you doing this? You've already lost your job." Ilara met her gaze. She thought of her parents. She thought of the fire. "Because," Ilara signed, her hands clear and steady, "I know what it feels like to be in a room and have no one see you, and I know what it feels like to be the one who failed to speak up. I'm not making that mistake again." She turned and left the gallery, the shy waitress replaced by something new. She was a woman with a purpose, walking straight into the heart of a storm. The next 4 days were a blur. Ilara felt more alive than she had in her entire life. She was a ghost, but now she was a ghost with a mission. Her first call was to Martha, her mother's best friend, a formidable woman who was a professor of deaf studies at the local university. Ilara explained the situation, carefully, protecting Eleanor's identity as much as she could. Martha listened, her sharp eyes taking it all in over the video call. When Ilara finished, Martha signed. A doctor faking reports against a deaf woman to steal her legacy. It's disgusting, and it's ancient. They just used to call it lunacy. Now they call it cognitive decline. I'll make some calls. The deaf network is wide. Someone knows this, Dr. Croft. Someone always does. 2 days later, the call came. Martha had found a lead, a former nurse at Croft's private clinic. She had been fired, and she was the daughter of one of Martha's old students. Ilara met the nurse, a woman named Lena, in a crowded coffee shop. Lena was nervous, but angry. "Dr. Croft, he's a hack," Lena said, stirring her coffee so hard it sloshed over the rim. "He treats his wealthy patients like cash machines. Executive physicals that are just vitamin drips, stress reports for lawyers. And he's got a gambling problem, a bad one. I used to see his bookie's name on the caller ID." "A gambling problem," Ilara repeated, her heart pounding. "Do you have any proof? Anything at all?" "He's stupid," Lena said. "He keeps 2 sets of books, one for his real billing, one for private consultations. He keeps it on his personal office computer, not the main server. I saw him use it. I know the password. It's Maserati. Classy, right?" "What about Marcus Slade?" Ilara asked. "Never heard the name," Lena said. "But there was one patient, MS, who paid a lot, always in consultation fees, but he never came in. The payments were huge, and they always happened right before Croft paid off a big debt. This was it. The link." Meanwhile, Ilara knew she was being watched. A sleek black car, not the one she'd seen Julian in, was parked across from her apartment building for 2 days straight. They were clumsy. Julian's men. They were investigating the waitress. Good. On the 5th day, she got the package from Michael, the driver. It was a slim flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop. Eleanor's proposal was brilliant. It was 40 pages of dense, perfectly argued data, market analysis, and a compassionate, revolutionary plan to build resource centers for deaf youth. It was the work of a CEO, not an invalid. Ilara spent that night translating the entire document, preparing her own notes, rehearsing the speech, learning the rhythm of Eleanor's written voice. The next day, the day before the board meeting, she knew it was time. She couldn't just ambush Julian in the boardroom. She had to break his defenses before the battle. She had to show him the truth, now that she had it. She called the private number Michael had given her, the one for Julian's personal assistant. Mr. Thorne's office. "My name is Ilara Vance," she said, her voice clear. "I need to speak to him. Tell him it's about his mother. Tell him I have the MS files from Dr. Croft's computer." She hung up. She waited. The black car was still outside. She was terrified. She was baiting a lion. 10 minutes later, her phone rang. An unknown number. "My office. Thorne Tower. 1 hour," Julian's voice said. And the line went dead. Thorne Tower was a monument to power. Ilara walked into the lobby, her old black dress her only armor. The security guard had her name. She was sent to the penthouse floor. The elevator doors opened directly into his office. It was a vast space, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. And there, standing in front of the window, a dark silhouette against the setting sun, was Julian Thorne. "You're taller than I remember," he said, not turning around. "You have 60 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have you arrested for extortion." "I don't want your money, Mr. Thorne," Ilara said. She was surprised to find her voice wasn't shaking. He turned. His face was drawn, tired, and full of a cold, exhausted anger. "No." "What then? A job? You find out I have a deaf mother. You learn a few signs at the restaurant, and you think you've found a golden ticket." "My parents were deaf," Ilara said flatly. "I'm a coder. My first language was American Sign Language. What you saw at the restaurant wasn't an attack. It was a greeting." Julian's composure cracked. He hadn't known. His investigators were good, but Ilara's past was quiet. "A coder?" "Yes. And when I signed, are you okay?" "To your mother," she signed back. "No, help." And then she signed, "My son is controlling." Julian's face flushed dark red. "You're lying. My mother, she hasn't signed in years." "She hasn't signed to you," Ilara said, stepping forward. "You took her language, Mr. Thorne. You and Marcus Slade." "You will not speak his name," Julian warned. "I will," Ilara said, her voice rising. "You're grieving. You're so terrified of losing her. You've locked her in a box. But Marcus isn't protecting her. He's using your fear. He's using your protection as evidence to have her declared incompetent." "That's a lie. He's family. He's protecting our legacy. My mother, she's not well. She's confused." "Is this the work of a confused woman?" Ilara pulled the flash drive from her pocket and threw it on his vast, empty desk. "That's a 40-page proposal for the foundation. She wrote it herself. In the last year. In secret. While you were treating her like a child." Julian stared at the drive, but didn't touch it. "And this," Ilara said, pulling a second drive from her other pocket, the one Lena had given her. "This is a copy of Dr. Croft's private ledger, the one he keeps on his Maserati computer. It shows every payment from MS for the last 3 years, payments that line up perfectly with his gambling debts. Marcus isn't just whispering, Mr. Thorne. He's paying to have your mother erased." Julian looked from the drive to Ilara's face. He was searching, desperately, for the lie. He saw none. He saw only a terrible, clarifying truth. He saw the shy waitress from the restaurant, but her eyes were not shy now. They were blazing. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you do this?" "Because your mother asked me to," Ilara said. "And because I know what it's like to fail the people you love. You still have a chance not to. You are being manipulated, but you are not the villain. Not yet." She turned to the wall-sized window, looking down at the city. "Tomorrow, at that board meeting, Marcus is going to execute his plan. You have a choice. You can side with him and lose your mother forever. Or you can side with her." Julian finally walked to the desk. His hand trembled as he picked up the 2 drives. What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice broken. He looked for the first time like a man, not a monolith. "Nothing," Ilara said, turning back to him. "You just have to get me in the room. I am her registered interpreter. You will let me in. And then, for the first time in 5 years, you're going to sit down, be quiet, and listen to your mother." The Thorn Heritage Foundation boardroom was on the 40th floor. It was a cold, imposing room, dominated by a 50-foot table of polished black granite. The mood was somber, the air thick with the smell of expensive coffee and self-importance. Julian Thorn sat at the head of the table, his face an unreadable mask of stone. Marcus Slade sat to his right, shuffling papers, a look of cool confidence on his face. He nodded sympathetically to the other board members. Dr. Croft, looking nervous, sat against the wall. "If we're all here," Marcus began, his voice smooth as honey, "we can begin. We have a difficult matter to discuss. As you know, we all love my aunt, Eleanor. Her guidance of this foundation has been legendary." He paused, his face the picture of false grief. "Which is why it is with the heaviest of hearts that I must address her recent decline." He launched into his speech. He was brilliant. He wove a tale of a beloved matriarch lost in a fog of confusion. He used Julian's protective measures as his primary evidence. Her son Julian, in his infinite love, has had to shield her from the world. She no longer attends functions. She requires 24-hour care. She has episodes of agitation, of erratic speech. It's a tragedy. But we, as fiduciaries, must act. I have a report from her specialist, Dr. Adrian Croft. Dr. Croft stood, cleared his throat, and began to read a prepared statement full of medical jargon. Progressive cognitive decay, auditory-based sensory deprivation, resulting in paranoid ideation. Recommend a full medical conservatorship. It was a flawless execution. The board members, most of them old friends of the family, looked devastated. A woman at the end of the table dabbed her eye. "Therefore," Marcus said, moving in for the kill, "I must move for a vote, to relieve Eleanor Thorn of her duties, for her own health, and to appoint a new acting head of the foundation, pending a full competency hearing. I, of course, would be willing to step into that role." "The motion is on the table," a board member said sadly. "Is there any discussion?" The room was silent. "Wait." Julian's voice cut through the silence. It was quiet, but it landed like a gavel. Marcus looked at him, surprised. "Julian, I know this is hard." "She's not here to defend herself," Julian said, his eyes cold. "It seems improper." "Julian, we discussed this," Marcus said, his smile tightening. "Bringing her here would be cruel. It would only confuse her." "Let's find out," Julian said. He pressed a button on the intercom on his desk. "Send them in." Marcus's blood ran cold. "Send who in?" The large double doors at the end of the boardroom swung open. 2 people entered. The first was Ilara Vance, dressed in her simple black dress, her face calm and determined. The second was Eleanor Thorn. She was not in a wheelchair. She was walking. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, her silver-white hair shining under the lights. She wore a sharp, crimson-red suit, a color of undeniable power. She looked, in every way, a queen. The entire boardroom gasped. Board members who hadn't seen her on her feet in years stared, their mouths open. "What is this?" Marcus sputtered, rising from his chair. "Julian, this is a circus. This woman, this waitress, she's some con artist. She's been manipulating my aunt." "She is my mother's certified ASL interpreter," Julian said, his voice flat. "And she is here at my mother's request. Mrs. Thorn has a presentation." "A presentation?" Marcus laughed, a high, nervous sound. "This is absurd. She can't—" Eleanor Thorne walked to the head of the table, opposite her son. Ilara stood beside her. Eleanor looked at Marcus. Her face was not angry. It was not sad. It was cold. Then she began to sign. Her hands moved, not with the weakness Marcus had described, but with the sharp, precise, articulate energy of a CEO. Ilara's voice, clear and strong, filled the room. "Good morning, gentlemen. And Madeline," she said, her voice a perfect echo of the power in Eleanor's hands, "I apologize for my theatrical entrance. But as you have been discussing my decline, I felt it was better to show you, rather than tell you." Marcus was white as a sheet. This is a trick. Julian, stop this." Julian just watched his mother, his expression unreadable. Eleanor continued, her hands a blur. "For the last 5 years," Ilara translated, "you have been told I am unwell. The truth is, I have been silenced. But I haven't been idle. For the last year, I have been developing the new cornerstone of the Thorne Foundation. I call it Project Coda, a $100 million initiative to fund and build combined deaf education and hearing integration centers in 20 cities. Ilara, please bring up the file." Ilara plugged the flash drive into the table's port. The 80-inch screen at the end of the room lit up. Eleanor's 40-page proposal, complete with graphs, budgets, and architectural renderings, filled the screen. The board was mesmerized. Eleanor and Ilara walked them through the entire proposal. Her command of the data was absolute. She anticipated questions. She detailed risk. She outlined a visionary future for the foundation. It was a masterful performance. When she finished, the room was silent. "That," said Madeline, the woman at the end of the table, "is brilliant, Eleanor. Absolutely brilliant. But," Marcus stammered, "her health. Dr. Croft," he said. "Ah, yes. Dr. Croft," Eleanor signed, turning her cold gaze to the doctor, who was sweating through his suit. "I believe Dr. Croft has his own extracurricular interests," Ilara's voice continued. "On this drive, I have a copy of his private ledger. It details numerous consultation payments from a client identified as MS. These payments correlate perfectly with large and apparently successful bets on the European racing circuit. I wonder, Marcus, do you happen to follow the races?" Marcus Slade's face collapsed. The game was over. "This is," he tried, "slander. It's bank records," Julian said, his voice now full of a quiet, terrible power. He slid a file across the table. "My own investigators confirmed it this morning. The transfers from your offshore account to Dr. Croft's. It's all here, cousin." Marcus looked at Julian, then at Eleanor, then at Ilara. He saw no escape. He said nothing. He simply, silently, sat down, a ruined man. "I believe," Eleanor signed, her posture perfect, "that the motion on the table was to remove me. I would like to amend that motion." Her hands moved. "I move to remove Marcus Slade from this board, and from any and all positions at Thorne Industries, effective immediately. And I move to appoint Ilara Vance as the new executive director of Project Coda, to report directly to me." "Seconded," Madeline said, slamming her hand on the table. "All in favor?" Every hand in the room, except for Marcus's, went up. Julian held his hand high, his eyes never leaving his mother's face. "The motion passes," he said. Security guards, whom Julian had waiting outside, entered the room and walked silently to Marcus. He stood, not looking at anyone, and allowed them to escort him out. The room was silent. The battle was over. When the boardroom doors closed and Marcus was gone, Eleanor's shoulders sagged, just for a moment, in relief. The board members began to crowd her with congratulations, but her eyes were only on her son. Julian walked slowly to his mother and Ilara. He looked at the woman he had almost destroyed, his face humbled and broken. "You saved us," he whispered to Ilara. "You saved me from myself." "She saved herself," Ilara said softly. I just held the microphone. Julian turned to his mother. His hands, clumsy and trembling, rose. He was out of practice, but the message was clear. "I am sorry, Mom. Forgive me. Please, teach me. Again." Eleanor's eyes flooded with tears. She didn't sign. She lunged forward and pulled her son into a fierce embrace, and Julian wept, holding her, the two of them finally speaking the same language. Ilara stepped back, tears in her own eyes, but a hand on her arm stopped her. It was Eleanor, who had pulled back from Julian, though they still held hands. "And where do you think you're going, Miss Vance?" Eleanor signed, a radiant smile on her face. "Project Coda doesn't launch itself." I don't know anything about running a foundation," Ilara stammered, her shyness flickering back. "You know how to listen," Eleanor signed, and Julian, watching her hands, spoke the words for her, his voice thick. "You know how to fight. You are exactly what this foundation needs." Ilara looked at the united family, at the new, open future in front of them, and smiled. "I accept." Months later, Ilara stood on a brightly lit stage for the official launch of Project Coda. She spoke with a confidence she never knew she possessed, while beside her, Eleanor signed to the packed, silent auditorium. In the front row, Julian Thorne watched them both, his hands in his lap, slowly, carefully, following every single word. A single act of courage, a single silent question, shattered a world of lies. Ilara, the shy waitress, didn't just find her voice. She gave one back to a woman who had been silenced by her own family. She proves that you don't need to be loud to be strong, and that true strength often comes from seeing the people that the rest of the world has chosen to ignore. Kindness is a language that everyone understands, even those who can't hear. Ilara and Eleanor's story reminds us to look closer, to listen harder, and to never be afraid to speak up for those who can't. What did you think of Ilara's bravery? Have you ever seen someone completely misjudged? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and support mean the world to us. Please don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more true life stories that will restore your faith in humanity. We'll see you in the next one.